These are the notes on supporting conclusions or claim evidence and reasoning. We are going to use CERs or claim evidence and reasoning, that format, in order to explain why we know something is true throughout the year. And so with these notes, it's just us going to start practicing that. How can we argue or show our point? And kind of back that up. And some of the things that we have on here, you won't necessarily know how to do yet, but we will reference them as we go through, or we'll kind of learn specific as we go through and learn some new chemistry concepts. So the first part of your CER is your claim, and a claim is a statement that answers the question. This doesn't include any of your explanation, reasoning, or evidence, so it shouldn't include any transition statements such as because. So you're just answering, it's a chemical change or it's a physical change. Whatever the question is that's being posed, you're just answering that statement and making a claim. Evidence is the data that is used to support your claim. This is kind of the stuff that you are going through in your head to make a decision. We're just writing that evidence out. This could be scientific data, that could be observations, that could be numbers that you've collected, or information that we have, such as density information. And we want to just include things that support our claim. This could be quantitative, so numbers, or qualitative, which would be descriptions, depending on the question or the lab that we are working on. So we are going to talk about chemical and physical changes later on. And so things that would fit into our evidence, those are our before observations and our after observations, if we wanted to show that maybe a change occurred or that a change didn't occur. Atomic properties or periodic trends, when we get to that later this unit, we could use information from our periodic table as evidence, like valence electrons, electron energy levels, or charges. I don't expect you to know any of that stuff yet. We'll talk about this stuff as we go, so this could be a good reference page. And you don't need to include irrelevant information, so just including the evidence that supports your claim that you're making. And then last is our reasoning. Reasoning is the explanation of the why and how the evidence supports the claim. It should include an explanation of any underlying science concept. So if you need to talk about, well, the definition of a chemical change or the definition of a physical change, it's kind of the rules or the scientific principles that kind of are connecting or showing this is why my evidence supports the claim that I made with that. So this sheet will be a good reference for later on. It's okay if you don't really understand how to do these right now, but as we go through those, this page will be a good reference. So we are going to start out with writing CERs, and we're going to use this image below and the lab safety contract, which you hopefully saw in class. If you are an online student, you maybe did not see this in class. So we're going to use this image to write a couple of CERs. So our first example is, the question is Savannah practicing lab safety? So we're going to need to make a claim. Yes, she is. No, she isn't. Evidence, we're going to use observations from the picture of what we can see that Savannah is doing. And then our reasoning is going to be referencing the specific rule or rules that are being followed or broken from the safety contract with that. So this is kind of where we're getting our reasoning. Our evidence will be observations. So let's take a look at what Savannah's doing. Savannah's right here. And if you haven't yet read through the rules, go ahead and read through the rules. But one thing I notice off the bat is that Savannah is drinking poison, and we don't want to be consuming chemicals, but we also shouldn't be even drinking in a lab setting. And Savannah also doesn't have on safety goggles. And so those are two things to me where I am, if I'm going to zoom down here, these are my observations. So Savannah's not wearing safety goggles, and Savannah is drinking a chemical. So my claim is going to be that Savannah is not practicing lab safety. And your claim should be answering the question. It's not a yes or no. So actually saying, if you were just writing the CER, I'm only focusing on this. So everything you should have here, I should understand what question you're answering in your claim. Here's my evidence. Now, as I get to my reasoning, I'm going to reference the specific rules from the contract. So I want to look at what rules are these addressing. So I'm going to go back up to my rules, and number 4, students should not eat, drink, apply cosmetics, or chew gum in the lab. And rule 9 is that students should be using appropriate eye protection, and they should also have their long hair tied back. But I think I forgot to write that one down. So I've got rules 4 and 9. And so then I can go through and list those, referencing my specific rule. So Savannah is not wearing safety goggles. Well, then that means, according to rule 9 of the safety contract, Savannah should be wearing appropriate eye protection when she's in the lab. So connecting how this evidence supports my claim that she is not being safe. And then Savannah is drinking a chemical. My reasoning there, according to rule 4 of the safety contract, Savannah should not be eating or drinking in the lab, especially not a chemical. If you want to pause this video and try example 2 on your own, example 2 is Sarah practicing lab safety? So take a look, go back up to the picture, and we're going to be looking at what is Sarah doing. Pause the video if you want to try this on your own. I'm looking at Sarah, and as I look at things that I can write down for my observations, Sarah is wearing safety goggles. She has her hair up, and it looks like she's paying attention and she is attentive to what she's doing. So I think that Sarah is practicing lab safety. And so I can go down here. Sorry if my scrolling is going to make you sick. So our question, is Sarah practicing lab safety? I think that Sarah is practicing lab safety. I'm going to list all the observations that I have. I don't see anything that Sarah was doing that's not safe. So I'm going to list Sarah is wearing safety goggles, and Sarah is behaving in a mature manner and is paying attention to what she's doing. And if you're wondering, where did I get this from? I am referencing exactly those rules, but I'm stating that evidence as my observation of what she's doing. Then connecting my evidence with the reasons. So again, we see that rule 9, Sarah's wearing appropriate eye protection. She also has her hair pulled back and is wearing gloves. And then rule 1 talks about behaving in a mature manner. All right. Next one more example, and then you're going to do one on your own. We talked about density in the density notes. And about what determines if something will sink or float. And so this is, will a piece of copper sink or float? So my claim is going to be that copper will either sink or copper will float. So copper will blank in water. Remembering back to those notes, I'm going to need to list those densities and compare those. So copper's density is 8.80 gram per milliliter. Water's density is 1.00 grams per milliliter. So now as I look at those, if water is what it is floating in, copper has a higher density. So we know that if something has a higher density than the liquid it's floating or it's in, it will sink. So my claim is that copper is going to sink in water. Sometimes it's important to look at your evidence before you make that claim. So listing what are the things that I need to pay attention to. And then my reasoning, I'm going to explain that. So since copper has a higher density than water, so it will sink. So connecting to that science concept we learned about in our density notes that whatever has a higher density than the liquid is going to sink. Whatever has a lower density would float because of how close those molecules are. All right, that's our last example we're going to do together. Example 4 or the last example on your notes. Will a piece of wood sink or float in corn syrup? You can submit this on that Schoology quiz if you are in online. If you are in honors, this is not included on your notes, but you're welcome to give it a try. If you would like feedback online, put this into the Schoology quiz for the CER practice, and I will give you feedback on it. Reach out with any questions.